Hey first graders, today is a writing lesson. We are going to continue with fiction writing for the rest of the school year. So we have already learned a lot about how to start a fiction story. So I want to take some time right now to just kind of review all of the things that we've learned so far. And I want you to remember that whenever you are starting a story, I want you to start with a plan. So we have, for fiction stories, we have kind of this 5-finger planner where we've gone through each of the fingers and we've learned the process of how to plan a fiction story. So let's go through some of those steps again, just to remind you. The first thing that we learned was to create a character. So once you had an idea for who or what your character was going to be, we want to give that character a name. And so that was the first thing you did in the thumb of your story planner, was think of a character, give that character a name. Once you had your character in mind, the next thing you planned for was the setting of the story. And we talked a little bit about how we want the character to match the setting, so it should make sense. So for my character, it's a bumblebee. It wouldn't really make sense for a bumblebee to be in outer space or on the moon. That doesn't really match the character. And so I picked a setting more like the woods, out in kind of the forest or maybe in the field. Those would be settings that would make sense for my particular character. Now, if your character is an alien or an astronaut, then a moon or outer space would make sense. So you just have to think about who your character is and what is going to be the most appropriate setting for that character. So that was the first two things. So I planned my character here in the thumb, and then I moved on to the setting, and I planned that my character was going to be in a park, is what I had decided. Then we moved on to the problem. So we went off of the hand a little bit, and we went up to this cloud at the top. And what we do when we plan a fiction story is, after we've picked the character in the setting, now we're going to think about what kind of trouble is this character going to get in. So many stories, when we read lots of books, you'll notice that there's a problem, and then the problem gets solved, and that's called the solution. So we want to think of, what is our problem going to be in this story? What's the trouble that the character is going to get involved in? So once you know the problem, you kind of have a big idea of what the problem is. For me, I said that up here, I said Buzz was going to get stuck in some honey. His feet were going to get stuck in some honey. Then we want to think of, how can we get that character out of trouble in 3 events. So the reason why we pick 3 events is because you want to make your story have lots of details. If you just say who the character and the setting is, and then you say the problem and solve it right away, it's not a very exciting story. So to keep our readers interested and to add extra details, we want to kind of explain what happens to our character over 3 events. So really you can kind of think about how this might be like the beginning, the middle, and the ending of your story. Now, if you have more events happening to your character, 4 or 5, that's okay. You will just probably be writing more and more pages, and that's totally fine. So be thinking about how your character is going to get out of trouble over 3 different events. So I planned those, and I said event 1, he's going to call for help, and then a ladybug comes. And then after the ladybug comes, he's still calling for help. The ladybug can't help him. So then an ant shows up. And so then the ladybug and the ant both try together to help Buzz the bee. They can't do it. They can't save him yet. So then my 3rd event is that he continues calling, and then 4 more bees show up. Maybe they were wondering where he was. They're like, "Where's Buzz?" So they go out to find him. And then they see that the ladybug and the ant are trying to give him some help, and so they decide to help as well. So then everybody's tugging and pulling and trying to get him out of the honey, and then eventually his feet kind of pop out of the honey and he's not stuck anymore. So those were my 3 events. So when you're planning your story and you have a problem in your head, go back and think about the problem and how's that problem going to get solved over 3 different events. Okay, now once you have your story planner or something like this completed, where you've planned out character, setting, problem, and then the 3 events, then it's time to start writing. So you always want to have a completed plan before you begin writing. The reason why is because once all of our ideas are organized like this, it's going to be much easier for us to now sit down and turn all of these ideas into a story. Sometimes if we start writing without a plan, our story might get a little confusing or the events might not make sense. And so it's better to just take a little bit of time before you start writing to plan it out. That way your ideas in your head and everything has been organized in a way that now you can write it on paper and it will make sense. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about today is how to make your story have a great beginning. We want to make beginnings in our stories kind of an introduction or a way that is going to really grab our reader's attention. So when you're reading a story, if it starts out really boring, you might think, I don't want to read this anymore, and then you'll put the book away. So we really want to have a great beginning that's going to grab our reader's attention and make them excited about what's going to happen in the story. So I want to show you a few examples of some great beginnings. I found some fiction books here, so I've got about 4 that I think have really good beginnings, that they start the story off and it just is a really nice way to grab the reader's attention. So this is the story, The Rainbow Fish, and Mrs. Conyers read this story the other day. So here's the beginning for this story. It starts out like this. A long way out in the deep blue sea, there lived a fish. So let me read that one more time. A long way out in the deep blue sea, there lived a fish. That's a very creative way to start the story. So we already know the setting, and we kind of already know our character too. In just one sentence, they've already introduced us to that it's in the deep blue sea, and there lived a fish. A long way out in the deep blue sea, there lived a fish. I'm going to keep reading because I like the next part too. Not just an ordinary fish, but the most beautiful fish in the entire ocean. Wow, that really grabbed your attention, didn't it? That was a great beginning that the author Marcus Pfister chose for The Rainbow Fish. So another story, I've showed you this one a couple of times, Bear Feels Scared. So let's see how the author of this story grabs your attention right on the first page. It says, in the deep, dark woods by the strawberry vale, a big bear lumbers down a small crooked trail. That's a great way to grab your reader's attention. I like the very beginning of the sentence, this part. In the deep, dark woods. Ooh, it kind of makes you think that this might be a spooky story or something might be a little scary about those deep, dark woods. And that is kind of what the story's about, right? Bear feels scared in those deep, dark woods. So the author of this story has already told us the setting is going to be in the deep, dark woods. And as we keep reading, it says, a big bear lumbers. So then we already know the character as well. So that's 2 stories so far that have kind of already told us what's going to be happening, where the setting and the character is. Okay, this is Froggy's First Kiss. This is how this one starts out. It was the week before Valentine's Day, and for Froggy, Valentine's Day meant candy, but it also meant love. So here's the beginning. It was the week before Valentine's Day. I like that. So we already know that this story is going to have something to do with Valentine's Day. And so I like how they started that out. It was the week before Valentine's Day. Okay, last one I have here is Knuffle Bunny. And Knuffle Bunny, their great beginning sounds like this. Not so long ago, before she could even speak, Trixie went on an errand with her daddy. So not so long ago. A lot of times stories start long, long ago, meaning that it did happen a while ago. But in this story, the author is trying to tell you that it wasn't very long ago. So they're saying not so long ago, before she could even speak, Trixie went on an errand with her daddy. So we already know that it's going to be about Trixie and her daddy, and they're running an errand. So they've already kind of set us up for what the story is going to be, and they grabbed our attention not so long ago. So here are a couple of other examples that you might want to use in your story. This page is linked on our Flipgrid today. So if you are wanting to use a great beginning, if you are ready to start writing a story today, then take a look at the page on our Flipgrid. This exact page is linked there, and look at some of the great beginnings and see which one might make sense for your story. Now, not every one of these is going to work for your story. Like once upon a time, that really sounds like a fairy tale to me. That sounds like there might be princes and princesses or dragons. It doesn't really sound like the right beginning for my story about a bee, a bumblebee. So I don't think I would use that one. However, if I was writing a fairy tale, then I think that's a great beginning. So you want to make sure that the beginning you choose makes sense for what your story is and who your characters are, and just finding the right one. So, once upon a time, one spring day, there once was a, I could use that one. That would maybe make sense instead. There once was a bumblebee. Okay, keep going here. On a dark and stormy night. That's like the bear feels scared one, huh? So if your story's going to have a problem about a stormy night, then that might be a great beginning for you. On a planet far away. If your setting has been an outer space setting, or if you know your character is going to be an alien or an astronaut or something, this would be a great beginning for your story. It depends on who is your character and what is your setting, though, because that wouldn't make sense for me if I'm just writing about Buzz the Bee on a planet far away. That doesn't make sense. So make it match your story. Deep in the forest. I could maybe make that one work, but I could maybe change the word forest. Deep in the park. Maybe I could try something changing it up a bit. And the last one here, under the deep blue sea, just like we read in the Rainbow Fish. So you want to kind of think about what your setting is. It wouldn't make sense for me to use this one. Under the deep blue sea, there lived a bumblebee. That doesn't really make sense. I think that I could do this one. One spring day, that would make sense for a bee in the park on a spring day. I could use that as a great beginning. Or there once was a... Those would be some good beginnings for my story. So think about how you're going to grab your reader's attention when you start your story today or tomorrow, whenever you are starting a new story. And think about this poster and take a look here and see if there's one that matches for what your setting and your characters are, and see if you can find a great beginning to get your reader super excited about your story and grab their attention. Okay, so keep on writing. Remember that I always want you to start with a plan first. Once you've finished your plan, that's when it is time to start thinking about a great beginning and what your very first sentence is, because that very first sentence of your story is pretty important. We want it to be a sentence that grabs our reader's attention and makes them interested in what's going to be showing up in the rest of the story. Okay, so take some time today to think about this and keep on writing, and I hope you are all having a great day.